So great to have you all here today. I'm loving the buzzing conversation already, and thank you for your attention as we move into the formal start of today's session. My name is Amy Ray, and I'm the Associate Director of Scientific Ecosystems at the Good Food Institute. As we zoom out on the last decade of the alternative protein field, it's clear that there's been a remarkable degree of growth in the field and of progress on answering some of the key scientific questions underpinning alternative protein technologies. And really, this is a feat for any scientific undertaking. And yet we know that there's a lot of work that remains to be done, and that's why all of us are gathered here today. As the alternative protein ecosystem grows, so do the opportunities for collaboration across scientific disciplines and alternative protein production methods. And rather than continuing to operate in distinct and neatly tucked plant-based cultivated and fermentation silos, there appears to be a significant and a growingly significant and increasingly significant opportunity for closer coordination and co-innovation. Because we are, after all, targeting the same bold goals, and in so doing, many of the challenges we need to overcome are shared across production platforms on the basis of taste, texture, techno-economics, and other dimensions. So the goal of today's session is to make sure we're uncovering that web of interconnection and reducing the likelihood that we're missing out on essential opportunities to learn from each other while maximizing the likelihood that we're able to benefit from interdisciplinary knowledge exchange that's critical for building a world where we're in fact able to realize the many promises of alternative proteins. In essence, our hypothesis is that the alternative protein scientific network, if operating as a cohesive whole, is greater than the sum of its constituent parts. And I look forward to engaging your perspective on this question over the course of today's session. So in the spirit of collaboration, we're hoping this will be a very engaging, interactive session. We hope you'll feel prepared to share your own ideas and reflect on your own observations across the field. And we'll begin with brief presentations from two leading academics, two of my favorite people in the alternative protein field, both extraordinary individuals and true alternative protein champions that I'm really proud to have with us today. We'll have Professor David Kaplan at Tufts University and Professor Girish Ganyal of Washington State University joining us. And they both inhabit such unique perspectives, and we share some of the primary gaps and opportunities that they're seeing for greater scientific collaboration between the plant-based and cultivated spheres. In addition to hearing from two very, very cool people, a big focal point of this discussion is to get a real pulse as a scientific community on where we collectively see the interconnections being. As they present, take some time to think about the challenges and opportunities you yourself are observing in the field across disciplinary bounds that, if answered, might accelerate the pathway towards greater scientific discovery and translation. Following their presentations, we will move into table discussions where you'll reflect on a set of questions individually and in concert as a community in active discussion with your fellow table mates. We'll have some time for community shout-outs and then bring David and Girish back on stage for a synthesizing discussion and some closing remarks. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming the ever wonderful Dr. David Kaplan, Distinguished Professor and Chair of Biomedical Engineering at Tufts University, Head of the USDA National Institute for Cellular Agriculture, and GFI grantee to the stage. Thank you so much for being with us today, David.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy, first of all, for bringing us together and you guys coming here for science and science in this field. So this is wonderful to see you guys here. I have to give you a personal note of a couple of things. First, I don't know if Liz is still here. Yeah. So first, it's been an absolute joy for me to connect with people in person after so long. So for those of you who are here and made the effort to come here, it's just been really, really special to have the chance to talk with everyone. I was teasing Liz because I've known Liz forever on Zoom. It was the first time I finally met her in person. So now I know she is real, which is great. So enough about that. I'm really up here just to give you a very quick sense of how I look at the community. And when I mean the community, everybody here at this conference, but really from the academic perspective, and where I think the real strengths are for this field going forward, and where I see a few people call them pain points or areas where we can all think about how to do even better in the future. So hopefully that'll resonate with some of you, and we can leave here with a shopping plan or a master plan or whatever it is, a roadmap people call it, right, to get to the end goal, which is to make this whole field with an impact on all of us every day around the planet. So with that summary, how do I do this? The green button. No, that's the pointer. Oh, this one. Okay. Okay. Any other ideas?
Do we have any ideas?
Or just next slide. Does that work? All this planning. I can just talk. It's fine. I don't need the slide.
To the next slide.
Oh, there we go. Next.
Okay, now the green button.
Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, that's perfect, right there.
Just aim it anywhere in the room, but the TV.
Oh, okay, all right.
The RF balance is right there.
Very good. You'd never know it as an engineer. Anyway, so just in the spirit of why we're here, this is the way, again, I look at this field. So it doesn't mean everyone agrees, but I'm just trying to give you a sense that I don't look at it as, my colleague here who does plant proteins. Some of you do all proteins. We look at tissue engineering and cell ag as a sense. I think they all intersect in many, many, many ways. So that's my core message today. We're all part of this same goal, which is to get from the left to the right on this slide. There's intersections where we need the plant products, we need the alt proteins to fill in the gaps in other areas. They stand on their own at times, and in other times they're needed as part of the cell-based approach. In our own lab, obviously, we focus a little more on the cell-based, but all of this comes together. So that's kind of my kind of unifying message, that we all think about this as a holistic set of goals to get to where we want. Now the magic. Okay. It worked. So this is my view of what I think works well as we sit here today as a group. One, I think many, many thanks to both New Harvest and GFI, because they're kind of philosophies from the very beginning, where you don't fund somebody or get something going in isolation. You have to work as a team, get to know the other students, the other faculty. As Amy already said, the sum is better than the individual parts. So I think that's really created the overall driver from the academic side, because most of us started because of support from these nonprofits, and otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here today. So I think that's something we can build on, because the impact of those students funded and the grants funded over the years now has had a huge sort of amplified impact on the field as a whole. And you can tell that at this conference and beyond. So far, I would say from at least the U.S. perspective, I'm not as familiar with Europe and Asia and so on, but I think in the U.S. we've seen little dribs and drabs of collaborative support grants. Fortunately for us, we have a large USDA initiative, and that brings together now eight different academic institutions, and then we have industry involved as well. So we're able to do that, but there's very, very few and far between of these opportunities. So I think we need more. We're seeing some evidence of this, not so much public side, but at least with things like the Bezos Fund now and GFI involved, we'll see a little more of this collaborative spirit. So time to tell, but we need public funding. That's not going to go away for that. Industry collaborations, I think we need more and more of that as well. And you see, I think it's really nice at this meeting because we're getting all those folks together in the same rooms to talk about the needs. Industry needs us, at least I believe that, and we need industry. And those kinds of partnerships need to continue to grow. I know, again, for our own activities, we form an industrial sort of collaborative to help coalesce the fundamental science to help industry go forward. And I know other institutions have tried to do some of this as well. So at least we're off and running with lots more to do there as well. International collaborations, again, many of us foster those very actively, have student exchanges in our labs, collaborative research projects. So I think that's already got the good seeds going around, but again, we can continue to grow that. And this is a worldwide effort. The more we do this, the better for all of this, where we're going. And then for me, it all starts with our students, right? No matter how you want to look at this whole field. I've been doing research in biomaterials, tissue engineering for 30 plus years. I love what I do. But, looking at two of my amazing students out here, I've never had such passionate, dedicated, devoted students who are also brilliant at the same time as involved in the field right now. So how can I not love going into the lab every day to see what's going on? It's an absolute pleasure. And I think that's kind of the core of what we're all here for. If we can build on that, that's our future generation. The impact will be there and will make a difference. So those are where I think things are working pretty well today. And we want to keep those things going. So these are my views of some of the gaps where we can all think about things, talk about ideas, and these are just quick thoughts. You guys will have others, I'm sure. I think if I look at the academic labs, at least in the US again, and I think it applies worldwide, it's very, very spotty in terms of what labs are truly involved in this. And when I say truly involved, I mean more than one student. That's my criteria, if you will. Once you have more than one student, that means you're really committed. One student, great, but doesn't really have the impact, I think. So I think we need to figure out how to get more and more academics involved, and that becomes what are the incentives, what are the needs, driven by students as well. Funding obviously comes into this, et cetera. Number two, publication paths. I can speak for our own lab. My students do, I think, very, very good, solid science. Our goal with everything we do in the lab is to get it out there for peer review, full transparency, and that's a major role for the academic side. But at the same time, there's no one-stop shopping for that, right? It sometimes can be a bit frustrating for the student. They'll send something to Nature Foods and it's, too specialized, so they don't want it there. Then where do you go next? So there are journals for food out there, but there's no one place that this field as a whole, where all of us around this room could say, we could send our papers and there would be a ready audience editor for that, as well as a review pool that would understand kind of how this all fits together. So I think that's something that could be considered here. To whether it makes sense or not, that's up to the team here and see what you want to do. By the same token, we're at this amazing meeting today and yesterday and Monday, but at the same time, this covers a very broad, aspect of the field. Everything from I don't want to go through everything, but the investors, the companies, everything else in between. And there is no yet today one place scientifically just focused on the science where you can go for 2 days or 3 days and just all share what you're doing, talk about the science, talk about the progress, talk about the problems, so we can work more collaboratively towards the goals. So I think that's an opportunity to think about. I've had some discussions with Amy and others. Does that mean we need some kind of Gordon research conference? For those of you who know the Gordon conferences, which means a dedicated meeting every 2 years to just why we're here. There are other ways to do this with some kind of annual workshop that would have to be coordinated as well. I've mentioned maybe looking at some initiative through the National Academy of Engineering, where we could sort of get something on the table with a white paper or whatever. I guess my time is up. To coalesce all the science in one place. That's the message there. And then we've mentioned funding, so I don't want to belabor that. So gaps and kind of the opportunities, and then I'll pass the baton. One is just transparency. I think the more we build the academic side, the more information gets out there, the more confidence consumers, public officials, and others will have in what we're doing. And it's very difficult to do that with the companies. Not that their intent isn't good, but they can't publish, and it's not then transparent, and then it creates gaps and challenges. We just need to keep promoting more scientific interchange. And I know I look around the room with many of my collaborators already, and it's just a joy. And let's keep the momentum there. And I hope other labs will do that more and more. And then worker space at the bottom, right? I think as the field grows, if we start to think about scale up and so on, it's very difficult for every university to build these facilities and have them for their students. So we probably need to think about regional centers that could be academically focused, but be, have service for others as well, and somehow make this a reality. And we'll see how that goes. So those are my few thoughts this morning. I just want to end with my amazing team back in Boston. Thank you guys. And thank you, Olivia and Adam, for being here as well. Great job. Hopefully you got your pictures. So Amir is happy. And then I'm going to pass the baton over to my colleague. So, sorry.
Thank you so much, David. That was a great presentation to get our gears turning. Now, I'm delighted to welcome the amazing Dr. Girish Ganyal to the stage. Girish is a professor of food science at Washington State University, an extrusion extraordinaire at the School of Food Science, and GFI grantee. Girish, thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to your presentation.
Either way, I think you guys can hear me, right? Good morning, everyone. How are you guys doing? Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure you guys are here. Well, since David talked, covered a lot of things, I don't think I don't need to go through my slides. So probably I'll tell you some jokes. Something. Can you guys hear me without mic? On the stream, there's a stream. Okay. All right, I'll try this. All right. So first of all, I want to say Amy here is a fantastic moderator. Do you guys think that? Am I right? Right? She does a fantastic job. And I want to say, whenever I meet her, she's always smiling. It's so amazing. And that kind of keeps everyone lively and enjoy the session. So thank you for doing that. All right. So what I'm going to talk about, just to add a few more comments to what David mentioned. So I'll tell a little bit about my background, because that will put some things in the industry, working with plant-based proteins for 21 years. Okay. And the products that I help to make are in Boca Burgers or Guardian Protein, and also Impossible Foods too. They also use that. So I used to work with textured proteins 20 years ago, right? And then for 7-8 years, I worked with it. Then I went to work for Frito-Lay, PepsiCo. Then I stopped working on that. And then when I went to WSU, became a professor, then everybody starts talking about this, right? And they all want to learn about how to texturize protein. So it's fascinating coming back, circle. So that's what I do. I know a little bit about extrusion. Okay, I don't know everything about it. Every time I learn, and David made a fantastic point about students. That's how I learn. The students who come to the lab, they're really interested with it, and they teach me how to do new things, right? And it's fascinating. And that's so true, because, we, with our experience, can pass on certain things so the young students don't repeat the mistakes, but make new mistakes and learn from it. So that's what I believe in. I just have one statement here. The product ready to eat must combine all the nutrients, right? But it also has to have that texture and taste that should be appealing, right? If that's not going to happen, whatever else we do, it's not going to do anything, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And as a researcher, when we work on things, we don't focus on that part unless we are doing sensory research, right? So it's important to consider that. I don't have fancy slides like David does. I just have this. So we work on plant-based meats area, but obviously with the cultivated and fermentation areas, there's a lot of science, a lot of progress that we can learn from. When I say we, from the plant-based protein side, right? And I'll just give an example. Okay. About 4 or 5 years ago, I had a new student come in, an undergrad student in food science. Her name is Marina Ikuse, from Brain Beach Island in Washington. A very serious, very, very brilliant student. And she came to me and said, I want to be in food science. I want to go to the food industry. So I want to learn from you. Okay, I said, well, start working in the lab, you'll figure out what we know, right? And she worked for 3 years, and then later she came to me and said, hey, I want to do a master's, and I want to work with you, but I want to work in cultivated meat. I'm like, I know nothing about sales. I know nothing about it, but she wants to work with me. So I said, okay, go find a faculty, whether here at when I say here at WSU or anywhere else, and I will call them and I'll try to see if we can initiate a collaboration. And that's fantastic. So all the young people here, keep doing that, right? That's what we need. The more collaboration with other areas. So she went to University of Idaho, which is right next to us, about 7 miles away, and found a faculty by name Nathan Shilley. He works in biomedical field, and what I understand, he makes is those ligaments for for athletes. If they tear them, he tries to build them. Okay, that's all I know. So I went and talked to him with Marina. Marina introduced me to him, and then we started working together. So what she learned was how to make textured proteins and use that as a scaffolds for growing the cells. So in learning that, what I learned is there's so much need for that, for preparing the right scaffold, and also attaching the cells to the scaffold is an issue. They use serum or other things that, sorry, I don't know much about it. But so that's what she found out. And then she did a simple project where she assessed all the plant proteins commercially available today, making textured protein with them, and then see if the cells can attach and grow. And the only thing I know it went successful is Nathan, the other collaborator, was super happy. He was like, oh my God, you can attach cells to these things. This is groundbreaking. So he's going to publish that now. So you might see that paper down the road. But anyway, the reason I gave you that example is that's what we need. Okay. You guys have to do more of that, right? And everybody else here, if we can't do that, at least facilitate doing that, right? So those are two things I want you to take home with. And let me see what slides I have. So I did have this slide where I wanted to tell you about when we look at plant-based protein or plant-based meats, there's so many things within just that, right? If you want to make a burger, plant-based burger, those are the components you add to it to bring in functionality and come up with the product that tastes good. And what we work on is just, as far as research, developing textured protein, right? And that's just a small component. And anytime we talk about, extrusion technology cannot add, everything to it, of course it won't. I mean, you really need to bring everything, other technologies together to come up with the final product. So I just want to show this slide for the complexity of it. And this obviously is the extrusion technology that we use. But when we make these, one of the things we learned working with Nathan, and now we work with Reza and David, that you can actually, they want changes in this texture to facilitate the cell growth. But all the time we were doing the last few years was just trying to make that more edible, more appealable, right? So just another example where we didn't know what we were trying to do, right? But then we learned that, they need porosity in it. We're like, yeah, we can do that. So I think we need to talk more, right? All right, so this is my concluding slide. We're saying that you got to bring all those three areas together, and then there'll be a lot of overlaps, and those from overlaps, we can help each other and kind of come up with a product or products or a series of products that meets the consumer demand. All right, some final thoughts here. The first one there, industry, academia. I wanted to keep writing that, a lot of it, because it's just not one university working with one company. It has to be a group. It has to be a lot more companies and a lot more universities working together. And they would hit that point pretty well. And identifying critical gaps across and communicating those gaps is important. Just that one example I talked about, we need porosity in that high moisture meat analog so that the cells can attach and grow, right? That's communication. We just didn't know that, right? So more communication about those gaps is important. And obviously, how can we learn It should leading to more collaborative projects, more bigger collaborative projects is important with multiple players. And obviously federal funding is important, but I think as researchers, we have to come outside our box or outside our cages and work with other people, even if we have a small amount of money, right? The small amount of money also helps a lot to trigger ideas, and then the funding comes through. Right. And this point, David, you made a good point on that, and I think we're thinking alike. Very important to have integrated professional meetings. So I was, you go to one area where there's only plant-based protein, you go to another area there's fermentation. I think more and more we should have a collaborating meetings. I think that's it. I'm going to go back to that one thing I mentioned about, and then we had to come together for it. Okay, that's what I wanted to convey to you. All right, and then finally, oops, slide not moving. Can you progress one slide? Oh, there you go. That's my team. This is a year ago or 2 years ago, and I told you about Marina. She's right there hiding behind. Okay. And she wants to work in the cultivated meat area in the future, but she went to Germany for a year. Okay, she wanted to take a break and do some immersion program over there, so she's over there. I told her, you got to do a PhD. And she's like, I'm not going to do it with you this time. I'm going to go with somebody who is only doing substance. So I'm trying to find her someplace. All right, that's all I got. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Girish. What a fantastic distillation of the opportunity you see for more cohesion across the alt protein scientific community and network. So now we'll be moving into the community discussion portion of today's session. At your table, you'll find pieces of red and green paper. Please spend the next 8 minutes quietly reflecting on the 2 following questions. On the red paper, please write down your response to question number 1. What do you see as the challenges with respect to collaboration between the plant-based and cultivated meat research communities? And then on the green paper, write down your response to question number 2. What ideas might you have for building a cohesive, inclusive, and interconnected alternative protein scientific network? As you do that, think back on experiences you may have had in other fields. Is there someone or maybe something new entirely that we can kind of create from the folds here? But is there something that's worked really well in the food science discipline or in the biomedical engineering discipline that you'd like to bring forth into the alt protein community? One note I'd like to make here also is that nuanced ideas are very useful here. So it's not a mystery that research funding itself is a bottleneck. But if more funding is the solution you want to put forth, what type of funding is most critical? At what kinds of intersections? And furthermore, what ideas might you have beyond funding that exists for fostering deeper cohesion across the alternative protein community? So with that, I will let you break for 8 minutes of quiet reflection, and we'll come back together shortly. Thank you. All right, just one more minute of individual reflection, and then we'll move into our discussion portion. All righty. I hope you all had the opportunity to scribble down some of your thoughts. We'll use these as the basis for discussion, but please do, when you leave the session, if you feel comfortable, leave them behind so that we can kind of make sure we're capturing all of your various thoughts and ideas and reflections. So now we're going to be moving into the discussion portion of our session. As a table group, discuss the following questions. Which of the challenges feel most essential to resolve and why? And what idea are you most excited about to address this challenge and why? Before you dive into discussion, I'll leave you with a couple notes. There are a variety of disciplines and career stages represented in this room at each table, which is precisely the point. And so please do make sure you're being thoughtful and conscientious about creating space for all of the perspectives in the discussion, and try to approach these conversations from the posture of curiosity in more deeply, more meaningfully engaging with and understanding the perspectives and ideas brought forth by your peers and colleagues. Okay, so we've got 20 minutes for discussion. Before the end of this portion, please do remember to nominate one representative from your group to share a challenge and solution that emerged from your discussion, and we'll come back together in a little bit. Thanks so much, everyone. Let the discussions begin. wrap up, please remember to nominate a representative from your table to share out in our community discussion. So just one last minute, nominate a person, we'll come back together to talk. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. I so appreciate the creativity and passion and sincerity that you brought into the room today. It was so fun to just kind of walk around and eavesdrop on the many insights surfacing through your discussions. Now we're going to move into the community share out, and Hannah and Claire will be our two mic runners going around the room to capture your various ideas. Beginning with this first table over here. If you all feel ready, it'd be fantastic if you could, again, help us share in no more than 1 minute, one of the challenges and one of the solutions that emerged from your discussion.
Hello, this is Elliot. I'm a scientist at GFI that works on cultivated meat. So we at our table have Young Han, who's one of the food scientists at Good Meat. So we spent a lot of time talking about like sort of this problem with, especially within companies as they currently exist. So I think to summarize the challenge, it would be siloing. So siloed expertise, siloed skill sets in terms of background from where different scientists and engineers are coming from. And in terms of solutions, we discussed, I think, on a high level, especially within companies, so a little bit at the actual point of the problem, not necessarily upstream of that, but creating incentives within the company to share information between different divisions and departments. So Good Meat and Just, they have plant-based meat that they make, but they also make cultivated meat. How do we get those groups talking to each other within the company? And also thinking about hiring for specific positions that specifically serve as a bridge between these different domains. So can you hire people within these companies to sort of specifically understand what are the challenges within each division, understand the language that each of these different scientists, engineers, data scientists, et cetera, are talking, and be able to communicate that as a sort of bridge between individuals and help them sort of coordinate things a little better. So that's a quick summary.
Thanks a lot, Elliot. All right, moving on to table number 2.
Hey everyone, I'm Will. I'm a bioprocess engineer at Prolific Machines. We're a cultivated meat company. So I think our challenge was very similar to Elliot's table in kind of the siloing of the different disciplines, but more focused on the university where you have departments that are typically pretty disparate, focusing on either food science or biomedical research, which is more applicable to cultivated meat. So figuring out ways to build bridges between those different departments and academic disciplines. And then on the solution, we were thinking about GFI has a great database that kind of highlights a lot of the research that's going on in these 3 different fields of alternative protein research. But the example that was given on the kind of research that's going on in an adjacent field and figuring out how to expand that database to capture people doing tissue engineering research, chemical engineering research, other things where the PI might not know about the field of cultivated meat, but their research could be very applicable and could be a good opportunity for collaborating.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Table number 3.
Hello. Okay. So we talked about how the plant-based and cultivated meat industries might, the challenge being that they might not be that like open to each other because they might think that what they're doing is really different. And especially because with the cultivated meat, you're kind of starting off with an animal, whereas with the plant-based, you're starting off non-animal. And then one of the solutions we talked about was them kind of being more open to working with each other. For example, using the plant-based materials that are created by the plant-based industry to make scaffolds. And then on the other hand, the plant-based industry being more open to realizing that the cell-cultivated industry is not going to start off perfect in terms of being 100% animal-free, but that hopefully there's a shared vision that there is a goal of being animal-free or not slaughtering animals at the very end of the goal that we're trying to reach.
Thank you. Claire, table number 4.
Hey, my name's Gabe. We at our table, a lot of our conversation revolved around communication, either between scientists, between companies, between different sectors, precision fermentation, cell ag, and just plant-based. And then, of course, also to the consumer as well. I think because it's such a nascent industry, there is just so many new terms floating around. People don't know what to call it. And even like just within cell ag, is it clean meat? Is it cell meat? Is it cultivated meat? Is it cultured meat? There's so many different things to call it. And that, especially then when you're talking to your consumer, is just like wildly confusing. So one thing that I think, and there were a lot of problems and solutions we talked about, but maybe one that we could highlight is talking about aligning on nomenclature when we're talking about consumer education, and then trying to get people a little bit more aware of like really what is the impact, and trying to be a little bit more consistent on that, so we avoid greenwashing, trying to be a little bit more clear about what really goes into the product and get people like very familiar with food again. I mean, the food system is increasingly disconnected from the means of production, and people don't really know what goes into food. So really being like clear and open, but also consistent about communication was something we were excited about.
Thank you so much. Table number 5.
Hello, I'm Chang Qi, and we also have a kind of a mix of people from industry and academia, and we see the same kind of challenges as table 4. Like the main thing is seems to be a lack of communication between industry and academia, and between researchers in different disciplines. And we all love like Grish's story of how his undergraduate student like reached out and opened this new field of research for him, and Flaring from the Appalachian State University, like he came up with a good idea of maybe GFI can start a kind of a student fellowship or internship kind of a program that we can place students to different researchers' laboratories, or maybe in different industries. So sometimes like our universities even have funding for that, but sometimes it's difficult to identify a place to place the student. I think this it could be very helpful to strengthening the research collaborations, as well as build a strong workforce for this field. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Table number 6.
I think our conversation mostly focused on communication as well, which seems to be a theme that's coming up. So maybe just to hit on a different point of that, we talked about the tension that there is between wanting to have that open communication and open dialogue, but also feeling like there's a need to kind of protect your own ideas, your own research, or if you're a company, your own IP, and you have to make money to survive as a company. So figuring out how how to work with that tension. And in terms of solutions, it's not easy to do, but just recognizing that it's going to take intention and effort and more hard work to get those collaborations to happen, but that it's going to pay off in the end and be really, really worth it if we can do that.
Thank you, Erin. Table number 7.
Hi, thanks. I'm Kate. Probably the only one that can read my writing. So I guess one of the key ones we had was potentially about the two different research sectors discussing sort of who does what. Like, is a ground chicken and cultivated meat the most effective use of those resources versus, say, maybe something like a salmon versus a plant-based? So that's a possibility. But also that asking companies and others, what do they need? And sensing the research questions a little bit more. But the other one we thought possibly needed more attention was the perception of consumers and really baking in social research that will be going on the whole PTC trifecta, price, taste and convenience, and making sure that there's other aspects, cultural and others, that are really embedded into some of the research outcomes. On solutions, again, we thought that the cultivated meat sector could value the plant-based sector's expertise in scaling, marketing and distribution, even though, of course, there are different challenges and tech, of course. But we also went a bit further and thought that there could be other additional disciplines to integrate into this. So when we hear about buildings, energy use, social, healthcare, so that there's sort of more holistic thinking on these other sectors and bringing other ideas for more efficient, energy efficient buildings and cost efficiency and all of those things. And then related to that might be about baking renewable energy into the cultivated meat facilities, or quantifying health benefits, nutrition standards, all of those sort of things that could help both sectors. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Table number 8.
Hi, I'm Larissa. I think one of the problems with going later on in this in the order is that many of the excellent points that we thought of have already been discussed well by other people. I think if we had to talk about one thing, it's sort of the balancing tension that needs to occur between having new ideas and protecting your intellectual property, between having a focused research program or a research program where students could know where to go to do a postdoc or a graduate program versus having an integrated system. How to communicate ideas. Would it be helpful to have a meeting where at least we talked about the challenges that were available? For example, how do you make a sterile scaffold on which to grow animal cells? And perhaps not the answers to those questions, but rather just simply outlining the questions for year 1 and year 2, watching to see what comes back and fertilizes everything. And something that we didn't talk about a lot, but it's a pet peeve of mine, is how do you educate funders about timelines? I mean, this is not IT. You can't say, I'm going to go to FDA in Q2 2024. Ain't going to happen if the biology isn't there, right? So somehow you have to educate funders about timelines. Did I leave anything out? GFI as a central clearing place for everything.
Thank you so much. Table number 9.
Hello, I'm Valerie. I'm some Fisher Scientific. I'm an expert on plant-based meat extrusion, but we also offer cultured meat, cultivated cell solutions. And we discussed here at the table as challenges that it's most important that, first of all, we enable that everyone can understand the limitation and boundaries of the individual field, because extrusion specialists have no idea what cultivated meat cells need. And the other way around, fisher engineers might not really understand the extrusion process really well. And they don't also maybe understand what possibilities we have to make the process work, to make sure that the cells survive the process, for example. And then as I know, we also came up with, it would be really great that we establish an international exchange platform. So our table was very international. We had representatives from the US, India, and Germany. We found out that it's very difficult to know who is doing what, even within your country or your region, but then it becomes more complicated if you look towards US from Germany, for example, or the other way around. And this way we can avoid that, we can improve exchange between the different professions. And last but not least, it would be a very good idea to start with showing a diagram of overlap between fields, and also to break down the essence of the individual field so that it becomes more easier for everyone to understand what we're doing.
Awesome. Great ideas. Thank you so much. Table number 9. Table number 10. And we've just got a couple minutes here, so appreciate you synthesizing your thoughts concisely.
Yes. Yeah, my name is Erica. I'm definitely coming to this as a newer to the field. So our table had a lot of great discussion. And I think a lot of tables have already touched on some. I think we talked about new faculty involvement and collaborations, but faculty that come from different types of institutions, like primarily undergrads from community college or different four-year institutions as well. And then standardizing the technical meanings if you're coming, like the previous table just said, from different types of background. And so part of the solution, I think we talked about conferences as being a dedicated space to talk about the science advancements, and also part of those conferences being if you have a travel award or a grantee for bringing in a new faculty so they can just step their toes into the field. And then having an REU type program. So the NIH has these research opportunities for undergrads where you can go to industry or different universities around the nation. And so if there is a funding source like the GFI that established something like that, then you can kind of exchange students and bring back the technology, or just start a collaboration between different institutions. And that's a big way that a lot of biomedical research has advanced. So maybe that's a way to expand the field as well.
Thank you so much. Table number 11.
Hey everyone. Most of the stuff has been covered, but basically we thought one of the biggest challenges is being able to distill your ideas that can be understood by people from all faculties and fields. So distill your knowledge and expertise into simple to understand language. Because obviously, a cell biologist might struggle to understand specifics from plant biology and such and such and such. And one of the biggest solutions we focused on, which has been covered as well, is more conferences, ongoing conferences particularly on deep dives in science, where there can be a focus on collaboration and how we can help collaborate to grow this field, particularly between the fields.
Thanks, Daniel. Table number 12, and then is that our last table? There might be another. Okay, 12 and 13.
Okay, so our problem that we identified, or challenge that we identified here, was acknowledging that we do need collaboration between these three categories, plant-based, fermentation, and cell-cultured meat, but also recognizing that these three are actually really different in terms of their technologies, the input, output, feed, but also timelines. Plant-based has been around for a decade or more. Fermentation is kind of in between there, and cell-cultured, the expectation is that this industry will mature over the next 10 years. So bringing those three together with the industry expectation of pumping out products, for the consumers to have, there's different challenges that they need to go through in terms of technology and timelines. So those need to be kept in mind, and kind of echoing what Larissa said over, I think, table 8 of timelines. It can be pushed to put out products without the technology being completely checked. So I think that's our problem, and the solution is kind of keeping a futurist perspective of what type of food do we want to see on the table, 50 years, 100 years down the line, and starting that conversation today. So I guess this conversation is part of the solution. So
thanks, Isha. Table number 13.
Hi, I'm Julia McQuillan, and we have academic and industry. Many things we agreed with. It said here, I love the idea of GFI starting a journal. I think that's a phenomenal, interdisciplinary journal idea would be really great. One of the things that we talked about is plant-based approaches tend to have a halo virtual effect from the consumers, but cell-based tends to have a sort of ick factor, or people are a little nervous about food made in what perceives to be a lab. So the more you combine them, we really don't know what's going to happen, if it's going to sort of raise the halo effect for cell ag, or if it could
drag down plant. So it's just something from to be aware of, I think, is the social perceptions of what that means, and that could have some really beneficial effects to kind of bring in there. The other thing I think is really fascinating to think about is where are the homes of cell or plant or fermentation. So tissue engineering seems to be coming from medical into engineering, and so like where are the academic homes, and do we need to rethink the academic homes? Finally, this is a pitch I make with every scientist, engineer, technologist, myself. I work with middle schoolers a lot on science communication. So if we could explain to an 8th grader what we do, what's interesting, what's important, we can explain it to each other across disciplines. So having a version of what we do that an 8th grader could understand will help all of us be able to build. Finally, if we could make a network map of the questions and how we all connect to them, and like our research and science, we could see it. We could see the issues, we could see the connections, and we could find the gaps in each other. So that's another job for GFI.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for this vibrant community discussion. I have some thoughts on how we might. Oh, is there? Would you like to share? Okay. That's a veto. Thanks again, everyone, for this vibrant community discussion. And we're running a little bit short on time. So thank you to David and Girish for joining me back on stage here for some closing remarks and to kind of synthesize the many insights that came out of this discussion. So there were lots of valuable ideas we just heard from our scientific community. Many of them are proposing new projects and initiatives that GFI take on. And one of the invitations I'd like to extend to the community is whether we can kind of see ourselves as co-creators, co-architects, and all part of this mission, this project of building the field. There are so many pathways that need to be constructed, and I think all of us play a really essential role in that. So just with all of the things we just heard from our scientific community, are there any particular themes or ideas or initiatives either of the two of you would like to build upon or reflect upon? David, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Two things that, do I need that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Two things that just come to mind listening to some of the great ideas. You know, if we just go back to our fundamental academic mission as our core, right? We want to educate. And so one thing we didn't talk much about, I heard one note in the back, is developing curriculum, whether it's K through 12, undergraduate, graduate, and then making sure that gets disseminated. And we're certainly doing that part at Tufts. We've had courses in cell ag, but we need more. We need the plant folks to develop those courses and basically create a compendium of educational tools. And that can be routed through GFI or other places, but at least make them accessible to really educate and educate and educate. That's number one. Number two, clearly research has to be driven by funding. I hate to keep saying that, but it's true. But there are some little things we can do. Like I look around, looking at my own students who are in the alt protein clubs, you know, the ability of GFI to support these alt protein clubs to create this international community is remarkable. And they're all here talking to each other. That's an amazing start, right? And it doesn't, I hope I know this, but it doesn't take huge resources to do that. It's really, you know, seeding things. I think that could be done at the graduate level as well, where you could have small seed grants and things and whether it's funded by GFI or other places, that's to be determined, but where you're required for that to bring, let's say, somebody in the field partnering with somebody who's not in the field yet to bring others in. And that helps grow the community, and the student would have to work between two labs. So little things like that. Maybe they're 1-year fellowships, maybe they're 3-year fellowships. You have to decide, and those are things we can discuss. But I think there can be little steps that we can do as a community already that would keep growing the networks and more sharing. And then we still will need sort of the larger sums to really catalyze the growth. But if we start with these kinds of things, maybe we'll continue to grow and make an impact, which I think we can. So,
thanks, David. Girish?
Well, just continuing on what he said, with the collaborations and, you know, increase them more and exchange the students, go from one place to another place. I think we need to do that more. I think we all, as a researcher's point of view, we look for funding, but I do also believe that with our existing funding, we have to take the initiative to start those, right? I think if we do that, I mean, if we are able to do it, I think I encourage all the researchers to take a shot at it. And the reason I like that is because we did make an attempt on that recently. I sent one of my students down to Louisiana for the summer because to Brennan Smith at the USDA lab. But he's my collaborator over the last few years, so I know him well. So I know he will treat my student well. So I sent him, right? But that was a fantastic experience for him. And he actually, it increased our collaboration. It continued to progress our projects, etc. So I think we need to do more of that. It's not one-sided. I always think anything we do is a two-sided thing. So we both have to, on both sides, we have to make effort. From the audience, a couple key things. I mean, by the way, you guys are fantastic. All right. What you guys did just now. I mean, the fact that you all are here and you've just brainstormed on that, that's great. I think it's progressing already, right? Continue that. Two things that kind of stood out for me were communication and integration. And that goes to the whole human existence, right? We communicate more with each other and integrate our ideas, and then we can solve big things. So.
Thank you so much, Girish. And David, one last question to bring us to the close of this session is just whether you have any, as you zoom back out on this discussion, but from your various vantage points in the alternative protein scientific undertaking. Are there any last thoughts you'd like to leave our community with as we depart this session, as we depart the conference in a few hours, and kind of go back to our respective labs and institutions?
Probably something you're not expecting, and just looking at Erin and Claire and Liz and Amy, you guys are amazing catalysts, and Elliot, of course, that we all depend on to some extent, right? That without you guys spearheading all this, we wouldn't all be here. So I guess I would just give a shout out to GFI for what they're doing for all of us. And we don't want it to rest all on you. So the other comment, just to close from me, is that everyone in this room has to play a part, right? So whatever, small part, large part, whatever, I can speak for both of us, knowing, we are we love being collaborative. We're happy to help. So, don't hesitate to reach out to us if we can be helpful, and we can sort of, hopefully shepherd you in the right direction as well. So, it's been great.
Thank you so much, David. That is very, very kind.
Yeah, like in the community to progress anything, we always need doers, but also we need facilitators. We also need encouragers, right? And GFI plays a fantastic role in that, but there's a lot of people out here as well. The fact that I repeat that, the fact that you're here tells me that you're into it, you're committed, right? That's fantastic. As a closing thing, I just want to say a little thing why I do it, right? Why I work on plant-based or proteins in general is, I've been into small towns. I live in small towns since the time that I've been in the US. So I always talk about this. I go to grocery stores, and I was little kids trying to cross the meat aisle. It's like, I want that, I want this, right? They're excited to eat that. But then when I'm at the checkout counter, their carts, their family carts have a full bag of chicken nuggets, right? I mean, it touches me that, I wish they get the protein. It doesn't have to be the steak, but good protein versus a lot of carbohydrate loaded onto it only, right? So that diet is important for our growing community, the young children around. We need to feed them protein, right? We need to provide that. So that's why I do it. And I know you do it for that and many other reasons, but thank you for being here and supporting us as well. Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much to David and Girish for those parting thoughts, and again to all of you for participating in this conversation. We hope this is really just the beginning of this particular thread, so please continue building upon the ideas and themes that we uncovered today. There is so much momentum here for us to ride into the future, and I hope as you depart this session today and later in a few hours depart this conference, you're able to return to your work with a new eye towards building these deeper interconnections with your colleagues in other parts of the field. And the very last note I'll leave off with is that there's a lot of room for co-creation in the alternative protein field. If you're feeling particularly inspired by any of the ideas that were surfaced today and want to work with someone to make that happen, please do. We are all collectively architects of this new ambitious scientific undertaking, not just on the individual research question level, but at the ecosystem level, determining and deciding how we can best work together to advance our common goals. So with that, I will leave you with this thought. Let's keep talking, let's keep building, and thank you again so very much for everything you're bringing to this field and this work. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.